Imagine stepping into a swamp where the mosquitoes are not the problem. The problem is that something above you sounds like a tiny helicopter with teeth. There are no dinosaurs yet. There are no birds singing politely in the trees. There is only heat, mud, giant plants, and the feeling that the ground is alive. Welcome to the prehistoric swamp, Earth's original monster factory. This was not a spooky movie set. It was a real world that existed long before humans, mammals, and weekend bug spray, during the Carboniferous Period. Roughly 359 to 299 million years ago, huge swamp forests spread across tropical regions. Some reconstructions suggest atmospheric oxygen climbed far above today's level, and when oxygen, moisture. Plants and evolution all met in the same muddy room. Things got weird, very weird. We are talking about dragonfly-like insects with wingspans that could approach a seagull. We are talking about Arthropleura, a millipede-like giant that could grow longer than a tall adult human. We are talking about amphibians with big heads, strong jaws, and absolutely no interest in being charming. So why did prehistoric swamps create so many giants? The simple answer is oxygen. The better answer is that oxygen opened the door, but the swamp built the whole factory. To understand that factory, picture the air first. Today, oxygen makes up about 21% of the atmosphere. That is enough for you to breathe, run, panic, and complain about stairs, but in parts of the Carboniferous world, oxygen may have been much higher. That matters because many insects do not breathe like we do. They do not use lungs to pull air deep into blood vessels. Instead, they move oxygen through tiny branching tubes called tracheae. For small insects, this system works beautifully. For huge insects, it becomes a serious engineering problem. Oxygen has to reach the tissues before the tissues start filing complaints. Higher oxygen may have made larger insect bodies easier to support. It is not magic. It is biology with better air delivery. Now imagine a dragonfly-like predator gliding over a swamp in thicker oxygen, its wings cut through humid air. Below it, smaller insects scatter. You wisely would also scatter, but oxygen alone does not make a monster factory. You also need food, shelter, and a landscape that keeps producing energy. That is where the swamp becomes important. Carboniferous swamps were packed with strange forests. They had towering club mosses, horsetail relatives, ferns, and early seed plants. Many of these plants grew fast, died, fell into wet ground, and did not fully decay. The swamp was wet, low in oxygen beneath the surface, and excellent at preserving dead plant material. Over time, layer after layer of buried plant matter helped form coal. That is why the Carboniferous is sometimes linked with coal forests. The swamp was not just scenery, it was a carbon storage machine while plants were alive. They pulled carbon dioxide from the air and released oxygen when dead plants were buried instead of completely rotting. Some carbon stayed locked away. This helped oxygen rise and change the entire atmosphere. In other words, the swamp was breathing out the conditions for its own monsters. That is a wonderfully rude thing for a habitat to do. It grows plants, buries carbon, thickens the oxygen supply, and then hands evolution a bigger toolbox. Now add another ingredient. Abundant plant life means abundant food. Not every giant was a terrifying hunter. Arthropleura, for example, was probably not racing around like a horror centipede looking for ankles. Evidence suggests it was likely a detritivore, feeding on decaying plant material. That may sound less dramatic, but it is actually perfect monster factory logic. If the forest floor is covered in dead plants, then a giant cleanup crew can evolve there. Imagine a living floor sweeper the length of a small car moving through wet leaves. Not evil. Still not something you want touching your sleeping bag. Meanwhile, insects and other arthropods had their own opportunities. More plants meant more surfaces, more hiding places, more food webs, and more niches. A swamp is not one habitat. It is a messy apartment building for life. There is life in the water, there is life on the mud, there is life on trunks. Leaves, roots, fallen logs, and rotting piles of ancient salad. Every layer gives evolution another place to experiment. And evolution is very good at making experiments that would ruin your picnic. But why did so many creatures get big instead of simply staying small? One reason may be predator pressure. If other animals are trying to eat you, size can become a defense. A larger body can be harder to attack, harder to swallow, and more intimidating if you are a giant millipede-like creature. Being enormous may help you become less convenient food. That is an underrated survival strategy. Become too large to snack on. But predators can also become larger when prey becomes larger. That creates an evolutionary arms race. The swamp becomes a slow, muddy contest of who can grow bigger, bite harder, hide better, or fly faster. For amphibians, the swamp was especially useful, before reptiles fully took over dry land. Many early four-limbed animals still depended on water. Amphibians needed wet environments for reproduction. Skin moisture and hunting. A warm swamp with pools, fish, insects, and shelter was basically prime real estate. Now picture a large amphibian wading half hidden in shallow water. Its eyes sit above the surface. Its mouth is a trap with patience. A careless animal gets too close, and the swamp has lunch. This is where the word monster becomes tricky. These creatures were not monsters to themselves. They were normal animals doing normal animal things. The only reason they feel monstrous to us is that our world has changed. We live in a time when insects are mostly small enough to insult with a shoe. We assume bugs should be tiny. The Carboniferous did not receive that memo. Its air, forests, and food webs allowed arthropods to push boundaries that would feel absurd today, but there was a limit. Even with more oxygen, insects could not just grow forever. Bodies have trade-offs. Exoskeletons become heavy. Molting becomes risky. Moving a large body takes energy. Flying with huge wings requires the right atmosphere. Muscles and body plan, so the ancient swamp did not create giants by ignoring physics. It created giants by making the trade-offs less impossible. That is more interesting than a simple monster story. The swamp did not say, "Let there be giant bugs." It said, "Here are unusually good conditions. Now let natural selection get weird." And it did. For millions of years, these ecosystems buzzed, crawled, hunted, decomposed, and buried forests into the ground. The factory kept running because the ingredients kept feeding each other. Plants fed oxygen. Oxygen helped bodies grow. Bodies fed predators and decomposers. Dead plants fed the swamp floor. The swamp floor buried carbon and reshaped the air. It was a loop, and the loop was enormous, but no factory runs forever. Later, climates changed. Wet coal forests shrank in many regions. Oxygen levels eventually fell from their extreme highs. Reptiles diversified and became more independent from water. Ecosystems changed, and the old swamp advantage faded. When the factory shut down, many giants disappeared. Not because evolution suddenly became boring, because the world stopped giving them the same deal. A giant insect in today's atmosphere would face different oxygen limits, different predators, different plants. In different climate conditions, it would not be walking into its old workplace. It would be showing up after the factory closed. That is the real twist. The monsters were not mistakes. They were signs that Earth was once running under a different set of rules. Change the air, change the plants, change the water, and life changes its imagination. A swamp can become a nursery. A swamp can become a coal machine, and under the right ancient conditions, a swamp can become a monster factory. So the next time you see a tiny insect near a puddle, try not to be too disrespectful. Its distant relatives once lived in a world where oxygen was richer, forests were stranger, and mud could hide giants. Your bathroom spider is not impressive, but its family history is ridiculous. And if you were dropped into a carboniferous swamp for 1 minute, what would scare you first? The giant thing flying above you? The giant thing crawling under your feet? Or the giant thing waiting silently beneath the water?